He was my brother, my best friend. We built our family's business from the ground up, side by side. I trusted him with everything, my future, our legacy, my life. But when I uncovered his secret, a multi-million-dollar lie that threatened to destroy everything, he didn't just betray me. He set a trap, a meticulous financial crime investigation designed to make me the villain and send me to prison. How does a man fight back when his own blood has turned the world against him? You have to hear this story to believe the lengths he went to, and the final, shocking way the truth came out. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch! The first time I realized my brother was capable of destroying me, we were sitting in the fluorescent-lit conference room of our own company, a place we'd built from the dusty garage of our childhood home in a quiet suburb outside of Austin, Texas. Todd, and when I'm Daniel, and Todd. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and betrayal. Across the polished mahogany table, Daniel, my older brother, wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on our father, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern and sorrow. It was a look I'd seen 1,000 times, the one he used right before he got exactly what he wanted. "I don't understand, Dad," Daniel said, his voice laced with a theatrical tremor. "We've looked at the books 12 times. The money is just gone, too. The transfers were made from an internal IP address, from a computer logged in with Ethan's credentials." Every head in the room turned to me. My father, his face a roadmap of confusion and disappointment. Our CFO, a man I'd hired myself, now looking at me like I was a stranger. And me, Ethan, sitting there with my hands turning to ice. I felt like I was watching a movie of my own life, and the director had just screamed, "Cut!" on the reality I knew. Just an hour earlier, I was planning a weekend trip with my fiancée Sarah. Now, I was the prime suspect in a $1 million embezzlement scheme at our company, Innovate Logistics. "That's impossible," I said, my voice coming out as a croak. "Sim, I haven't authorized any transfers like that. You know I haven't." I looked at Daniel, pleading with my eyes. Tell them this is a mistake." He finally met my gaze, but there was no brotherly solidarity there. There was only a cold, calculating pity. "Ethan, we all know you've been struggling," he said softly, each word a perfectly aimed dart. "The pressure of the wedding, the new house, maybe you just got in over your head." And there it was. The seed of doubt planted so skillfully it looked like an act of compassion. He was referencing the life I was building, the one that, for the first time, was eclipsing his own. Daniel had always been the golden child, the natural leader, the one everyone assumed would inherit the earth. I was the quiet one, the grinder, the one who worked behind the scenes to make his grand visions a reality. We were a perfect team, or so I thought. He was the face, I was the engine. But lately, the engine had been getting some recognition. I'd secured our largest client to date, and my upcoming marriage to Sarah, the daughter of a prominent local family, had shifted the social scales. I was no longer just a Daniel's little brother. I was Ethan, and Daniel couldn't stand it. My father, a man whose approval I had spent my entire life chasing, looked at me with weary eyes. "Ethan, son, we just need the truth. If you made a mistake, we can fix it, but you have to be honest with us." The walls were closing in. He wasn't asking if I did it, he was asking why. The presumption of guilt was already hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. This was Daniel's masterpiece of manipulation. He knew Dad's soft spot was the family name, the fear of scandal. By framing this as a personal failing, a cry for help, he was positioning himself as the responsible son, the one who would clean up the mess and save the family from shame. He was creating a narrative where I was the troubled, impulsive screw-up, and he was the reluctant hero. It was a story my father was predisposed to believe, a dynamic that had been etched into our family since childhood. If I got into a fight at school, it was because I was hot-headed. If Daniel did, it was because he was defending a principle. "I didn't do this," I repeated, my voice firmer this time. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "I want a full forensic audit. I want the IP logs, the server access records, everything. I will prove this wasn't me." Daniel sighed, a long, mournful sound. The words were meant to sound supportive, but the subtext was chilling. "Go ahead. Struggle. It only makes you look more guilty. The days that followed were a living nightmare. The company, our shared dream, became a prison. My access was restricted. My colleagues, people I'd considered friends, would go silent when I entered a room. Whispers followed me down the hallway like a cloud of poison. Daniel, ever the magnanimous leader, announced that he would be temporarily taking over my duties, to allow Ethan the space to deal with his personal matters. He moved into my office, the one with the better view, the one I had earned. Sarah was my only anchor in the storm. She never doubted me for a second. "He's setting you up, Ethan," she said one night, her hands tracing the worried lines on my forehead. "I've seen this before. My uncle's business partner did the same thing. It's a slow, methodical erasure. First, they isolate you. Then, they discredit you. Finally, they replace you." She was right. I was being gaslit on a corporate scale. Every piece of evidence I found to exonerate myself was twisted by Daniel into another sign of my guilt. When I pointed out that the transfers were made at times I was in documented meetings, he would say, "You're clever, Ethan. You could have scheduled them." When I questioned why I would steal from my own future, he'd suggest I had a gambling problem or a secret debt, planting insidious little rumors that had no basis in reality, but were impossible to disprove. He was playing chess while I was still trying to figure out why my pieces were being taken off the board. The official financial crime investigation was a farce, led by an external firm Daniel had conveniently recommended. They were thorough, professional, and completely blind to the family drama playing out in front of them. They saw data, and the data pointed to me. My digital signature was on the transfers. My login was used. The evidence was, on the surface, irrefutable. I was trapped in a digital cage Daniel had built. The breaking point came during a family dinner, meant to be an intervention. It was just me, Daniel, and our parents, at the old oak table where we'd celebrated every birthday and holiday of our lives. My mother, a woman who typically avoided conflict at all costs, was wringing her hands, her face a mask of anxiety. She was caught between her two sons, a position Daniel had expertly put her in. Supporting me meant defying my father and accusing her other son of being a monster. It was easier to believe I had simply lost my way. "Ethan, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Your father and I will help you. We can arrange for counseling. We can help you pay the money back. Just end this." "Pay it back," I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Mom, I didn't take it." "Why won't any of you listen to me?" Daniel placed his hand over hers. "Mom, he's not ready to admit it yet. We have to be patient." He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a triumphant sorrow. It was the look of a predator cornering its prey. He was enjoying my pain, feeding on my desperation. This wasn't just about the company anymore. This was about power. It was about him reclaiming his spot as the undisputed center of our family's universe. That night, something inside me broke, or maybe it was forged. The helplessness I'd been drowning in began to burn away, replaced by a cold, hard rage. I had been playing by the rules of a game he had rigged. I had been trying to appeal to a sense of family and loyalty that, for him, didn't exist. I saw him for what he was. A narcissist who saw me not as a brother, but as a rival to be neutralized. The love and trust I had for him curdled into a singular focus. I wasn't just going to clear my name. I was going to expose him. I wasn't going to play his game anymore. I was going to create my own. And in my game, I made the rules. The decision to fight back wasn't a single moment of clarity, but a slow, hardening resolve that settled in my bones. For 3 years, I had been in exile. The financial crime investigation concluded as Daniel had orchestrated. A mountain of circumstantial evidence pointed to me. To avoid a public scandal and criminal charges that would decimate the company and our family's name, my father offered me a devil's bargain. I would sign a confession, resign from the company, and in return, they wouldn't press charges. I would be given a small, insulting severance package and be expected to disappear quietly. The confession stated I had misappropriated funds due to extreme personal stress and had agreed to a repayment plan. It was a lie, a document of my own surrender, but I was beaten down, and my lawyer advised that fighting a criminal case with my own family as the prosecution would bankrupt me and likely land me in jail anyway. My signature was the price of my freedom, so I signed it. I walked away from the company I had helped build, branded a thief by my own blood. The fallout was absolute. My parents, trapped in their cognitive dissonance, chose to believe the lie because the truth, that their golden son was a sociopath, was too monstrous to contemplate. They treated me with a distant, pained pity. Our conversations became strained, superficial exchanges about the weather, all of us pretending the elephant wasn't trampling the room. Most of my extended family and our shared friends sided with Daniel. He was the magnanimous one, the one who had forgiven his brother and saved the family business. I was the black sheep, the cautionary tale. Only Sarah and a few loyal friends stood by me, their belief a lonely lighthouse in a vast, dark sea. For 3 years I rebuilt. Sarah and I got married in a small, quiet ceremony at the Travis County Courthouse, a stark contrast to the grand wedding we had planned. My parents sent a card, Daniel sent nothing. I took a job at a small logistics firm in a different part of Texas, a humbling step down. I worked relentlessly, channeling all my anger and grief into my work. I started from the bottom, proving myself all over again. Meanwhile, I watched from afar as Daniel ran Innovate Logistics. He was celebrated in Austin business journals as a visionary, the brilliant CEO who had weathered a family crisis and taken the company to new heights. Every article was a fresh stab of injustice. But I wasn't just working, I was studying. I became obsessed with forensic accounting, digital security, and corporate law. I spent my nights and weekends reading, taking online courses, and dissecting case studies of corporate fraud. I needed to understand the mechanics of Daniel's betrayal, not just emotionally, but technically. I had to learn the language of his crime so I could one day speak the truth in a way they couldn't ignore. My chance came from an unexpected place. A former colleague from Innovate, one of the few who had always seemed quietly skeptical of the official story, reached out. He had quit the company a year after I left, uncomfortable with Daniel's increasingly autocratic leadership style. He told me something interesting. Daniel had recently launched a podcast. It was called The Ethical Entrepreneur, an irony so profound it was almost comical. In it, he pontificated about business ethics, leadership, and, in one particularly galling episode, the importance of family in business. He talks about you, Ethan, my friend told me over the phone. Not by name, of course. But he tells this story about a painful chapter where he had to make a hard choice to save the company from a loved one who went astray. He frames it as his greatest test of leadership. This was his new stage. He wasn't just content with having won. He had to keep rewriting the history, burnishing his own legend while cementing my status as the villain. A new wave of rage washed over me, but this time it was different. It was cold, focused, and patient, and it gave me an idea. The podcast was his vulnerability. It was his ego, broadcast for the world to hear. I knew I couldn't just accuse him. I had no credibility. It would be my word against the celebrated CEO, the man who had a signed confession in his desk drawer. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed a confession of his own. And I knew that the only way to get a narcissist to confess is to make them believe they're the smartest person in the room. My plan was meticulous. I created a fake persona online, a graduate student named Leo, studying business ethics at a prestigious university. Leo was a huge admirer of Daniel. He commented on every podcast episode, praising Daniel's moral courage and unwavering integrity. He emailed Daniel, asking insightful questions about his leadership philosophy. Over several months, I, as Leo, built a rapport with my own brother. Daniel, starved for the intellectual validation he never truly earned, ate it up. He loved Leo. Leo understood him. The final phase of the plan involved Sarah. She was the one piece of my old life that Daniel secretly coveted. He had been subtly flirtatious with her before we were even engaged, and I knew he saw my marriage to her as a victory I didn't deserve. I needed an excuse for Leo to meet Daniel in person. So Leo emailed Daniel with a proposition. He was working on his thesis, a deep dive into the modern Machiavelli, ethical ends through unethical means, and he wanted to feature Daniel as his prime case study of an ethical leader. But he wanted to do the interview in person. As a sign of his gratitude, he wanted to treat Daniel to a lavish dinner at one of Austin's most exclusive restaurants. Daniel, his ego stoked to a roaring fire, agreed immediately. The night of the dinner I was a wreck. Sarah was wired for sound, with a high-fidelity microphone hidden in her brooch. The plan was for her to coincidentally be at the same restaurant with a friend. She would approach the table, feigning surprise. My gamble was that Daniel, wanting to show off in front of his admirer Leo, who I described as being on his way but running late, wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to subtly gloat and flirt. It worked better than I could have imagined. Sarah played her part perfectly, a mix of polite surprise and subtle melancholy. Daniel, preening, invited her to join him for a drink while he waited for his interviewer. He began his performance, talking about how hard it was to run the company, how much he missed having family around, how he worried about me. "It's just so hard," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, every word being recorded. "I see Ethan's life, and I know he blames me. But he doesn't understand the pressure I was under. The board was breathing down my neck. Dad was about to sell. I had to create a narrative they could understand." Sarah leaned in. "A story," Daniel corrected himself, taking a sip of his ridiculously expensive scotch. "People don't understand complex financial realities. They understand stories. Good guys, bad guys. Ethan, he was never built for that top spot. He's a good number 2, but he doesn't have the killer instinct. I did what I had to do to protect the legacy. It was a mercy, really. I saved him from a failure he couldn't have handled." "But the money?" Sarah asked, her voice steady. "The transfers?" Daniel leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A bit of creative accounting. A shell company, a few offshore transfers. It looked messy, but it was all just moving our own assets around to avoid a massive tax liability. The problem was, an auditor was sniffing around. I had to pin the mess on someone, create a fire to distract from the real problem. Ethan's login was just the easiest path. It was business, not personal. He just made it personal. There it was, the whole confession. Cold, remorseless, and utterly damning. He hadn't just framed me to take my job. He had used me as a scapegoat to cover up his own financial crimes. I didn't go to the police. A legal battle would still be messy, and Daniel was a master at manipulating the system. I wanted a different kind of justice. I wanted to dismantle the myth he had built, using the very tool he had used to build it, his podcast. I edited the audio. I intercut Daniel's pontificating voice from his podcast, lines about integrity, honesty, and family first, with the crystal clear audio of his confession to Sarah. I started with his on-air voice saying, "A leader must always be transparent," followed immediately by his recorded whisper. I had to pin the mess on someone, create a fire to distract from the real problem. I called it The Ethical Entrepreneur, the lost episode. The day his next official podcast episode was scheduled to drop, I released mine. I sent the link to every employee at Innovate Logistics, to every member of our family, to every journalist who had ever written a fawning profile about him, and to our father. The implosion was immediate and spectacular. It was a neutron bomb that vaporized Daniel's reputation, leaving the building standing but the man inside a ghost. His phone melted down. His board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The external firm that ran the initial investigation suddenly opened a new one, this time with Daniel as the target. But most importantly, I got a call from my father. He was sobbing. Not the weary, disappointed sobs I remembered, but the raw, guttural cries of a man whose world had been shattered. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," he choked out. "I was a fool. I am so sorry." I had imagined this moment for years. I thought I would feel triumphant, vindicated. But hearing my father's broken voice, I just felt a profound sadness for the years we had lost, for the family that had been broken by one man's bottomless narcissism. Daniel was forced to resign. He is now facing multiple lawsuits and a federal investigation into the financial crimes he so casually admitted to. The family is in pieces, but for the first time, the pieces are starting to align with the truth. My father has asked me to come back to help him rebuild Innovate Logistics. I haven't decided yet. The wounds are deep, but for the first time in years I have choices. I didn't destroy my brother. I simply let him tell his own story, in his own words. I held up a mirror, and the world finally saw the monster that had been hiding in plain sight all along. My revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, intelligent, and absolute. I took the narrative he had stolen from me, and I gave it a new ending. A true ending. And in this story, I am not the villain. I am the survivor.